Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
It happened in the dead of winter, just outside of Traverse City, Michigan. A liquor store on the edge of town, Miller's Spirits, had been operating for over 40 years. A squat, lonely building off a desolate stretch of road that never saw much traffic after dark. The locals knew it more for its reputation than its products. The old man who owned it, Charlie Miller, was a recluse, stooped, pale, always in the same gray coat no matter the season. Some said he slept in the back. Others said he didn't sleep at all. Eddie was 24 when he started the night shift there. He just moved back from college, couldn't find a real job, and figured stocking shelves and running the register from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. was easy money. His first few shifts were uneventful. Boredom was his biggest enemy. A few late-night drunks, some weirdos buying scratch-offs and gas station wine. But after his first week, the store began to change. It started with the buzzer on the front door. Normally it would chime when someone came in or left, but one night, at exactly 3:03 a.m., it went off even though no one was there. Eddie checked the security monitor. Grainy footage showed the front door, empty. He even stepped outside into the snow. Nothing, not a soul for miles. He figured it was faulty wiring, but it happened again the next night. Same time, 3:03 a.m., no one at the door, but the buzzer went off and the air in the store got cold, unnaturally cold, like walking into a freezer. His breath fogged, and for a moment he thought he saw something move in the reflection of the beer cooler glass. A shape. Not a person, not exactly. Just a black smudge, a silhouette standing still behind him. When he turned around, there was nothing. By the end of the second week, Eddie had stopped brushing it off, and he started bringing a thermos of coffee and keeping the lights on full blast, even the flickering backroom ones Charlie always told him to leave off to save power. One night, while restocking the whiskey shelf, he heard someone whisper his name. It was quiet but clear. Eddie. It came from the back room. The same room Charlie warned him never to enter unless absolutely necessary. The whispering became nightly, always after 3 a.m. Sometimes it was just his name. Other times it was pleading. "Let me out," it would say, or "He buried me." Eddie tried playing music over the speakers, blasting classic rock to drown it out. It didn't help. The voice just got louder, desperate. One night, he'd had enough. He grabbed the store's only flashlight and opened the backroom door. The air that poured out smelled like rot, like wet dirt and old meat. The room was cluttered with dusty boxes and broken shelving, but one thing caught his eye immediately: a trapdoor nailed shut under an old rug. No one had ever told him about it. And yet he found himself walking toward it, hand trembling, trying to pull up the boards. Behind him, he heard the whisper again. Only this time, it didn't come from the trapdoor. It came from right beside his ear. "You shouldn't have opened it." The flashlight died. Total darkness. He doesn't remember much after that. He came to just before sunrise, lying on the floor in the liquor aisle. The store was dark, silent. His clothes were damp with something he couldn't identify. There were deep scratches on the inside of his arms, like fingernails had clawed at him. He quit that morning, didn't even tell Charlie he was leaving. The store is still open, still run by Charlie Miller, still offering cheap booze and discount cigarettes to the insomniacs and alcoholics who drift through town after dark. But if you talk to the newer clerks, usually young, usually desperate for money, they'll all tell you the same thing. They've heard the buzzer go off with no one there. They've heard the whispers, and none of them, not a single one, dares go near the back room. Not since Eddie disappeared. Because here's the thing. Charlie told everyone he quit and left town. But Eddie's car is still parked behind the store. And every so often, if you look close enough in the beer cooler glass around 3:03 a.m., you can see something watching you from the reflection. And it's not your own face.
Story number 2.
In the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona, there was a liquor store called Desert Stop Spirits, a run-down place stuck between two abandoned lots. The locals only went there when every other store had closed or if they were too drunk to care about how strange it felt. The flickering sign, the dust-caked windows, and the way the lights buzzed overhead all made it seem like time forgot the place. But the real reason people avoided it at night had nothing to do with aesthetics. It was what happened to people who stayed too long after midnight. Danny, a 32-year-old delivery driver, picked up an extra job stocking liquor shipments overnight. He didn't mind working graveyard hours. He liked the quiet. The store's owner, Gus, was a silent old man with yellowed eyes who gave off a weird vibe, but paid well and never asked questions. Danny's only job was to unload deliveries into the back, restock shelves, and leave before 3 a.m. On his second night, Danny noticed something strange. The store had no clocks. His phone kept glitching, freezing on the same time no matter how long he stayed. That night it read 2:58 a.m. for over 40 minutes. He shrugged it off, thinking maybe the signal was weak, and finished his work. But as he locked up, the store lights went out completely. No power. The entire place went black. He pulled out his phone. Dead. Not out of battery, just dead. When he turned around to find the emergency flashlight under the counter, he saw someone standing in the center aisle. A man, pale, eyes sunken, mouth open wide like it was stuck mid-scream. He wasn't moving, just standing, watching. Danny froze. He hadn't heard the door open. He hadn't seen anyone come in. He called out, "Store is closed," but the figure didn't respond. It simply vanished when he blinked. The next night, against his better judgment, Danny came back. He needed the money. He told himself he was imagining things, maybe tired, maybe hallucinating. But then he started hearing noises from the ceiling. Not the usual rattling or settling. This was heavy, dragging, like something was crawling above the tiles, pacing directly over him. When he asked Gus about it, the old man didn't even flinch. He just said, "Just finish your shift before 3. That's all you need to do." On the fourth night, Danny was in the back freezer organizing cases of vodka when he heard someone whispering from the next aisle. He figured someone must have slipped in, so he went to check. But when he rounded the corner, the whispering stopped, and all the bottles on the shelf were turned backward. Every label facing the wall. He hadn't touched them. No one could have done that without making noise. The lights began flickering again. This time, Danny had enough. He grabbed his keys and left the store, heart racing. But when he got outside, the world looked wrong. The street was darker than it should have been. The neon sign above liquor store was buzzing violently, and then it burst, raining glass onto the sidewalk. And there was no traffic, no cars, no sound. He tried to drive away, but the road out twisted back on itself. No matter how far he went, every turn led him right back to the liquor store. At 3:17 a.m., he staggered back inside. Gus was there, leaning against the counter like nothing had happened. "Told you," he said. "Don't stay past 3. Danny never came back after that night, and the story might have ended there, except for what people started seeing afterward. Customers reported strange things. People would glance at the security mirror and see someone standing behind them, but when they turned, no one was there. Others said they felt watched. Some even said they heard screaming from the air vents. And late at night, when the wind was just right, passersby swore they could hear a voice whispering from inside the locked-up store. A man's voice, desperate and shaking. "Let me out. I didn't mean to stay." No one has seen Danny since, but his car is still parked in the alley out back, keys in the ignition, engine cold. And if you ever find yourself alone at Desert Stop Spirits after 3 a.m., don't bother checking your phone. Don't bother running. Because if you're still there when the lights go out, you're not leaving.
Story number 3.
There was a liquor store just off Highway 19 in rural Mississippi called Lohman's Liquor and Tobacco, and it had a reputation that people didn't talk about in polite conversation. The building had been around since the late 60s, and aside from a fresh coat of paint in the early 2000s, nothing about it had changed. People said the place was cursed, but no one ever explained why. They just said, "Don't shop there after sundown." In 2018, a woman named Renee took a job there after moving into town from Baton Rouge. She was 35, newly divorced, and just needed something to keep the bills paid. The pay was decent, and the old woman who owned the store, Mrs. Lohman, was polite but strict. Her only rule, lock the doors before 11 p.m., no matter what. At first, Renee thought it was a joke, but Mrs. Lohman's tone made it clear this wasn't negotiable. "If someone knocks after 11, she said, "don't answer. I don't care if they're screaming or begging." For the first week, things were normal. Drunks, old men buying lottery tickets, the occasional biker coming in for cheap whiskey. Nothing strange, until the night Renee forgot to lock the door at 11 on the dot. It was 11:02 when she realized. She rushed to the door, and that's when she saw someone standing just outside. A tall man in an old-fashioned suit, like something out of the 1920s. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, and he didn't blink. He just stared through the glass. No knocking, no expression. She locked the door and stepped back, trying not to look directly at him. But when she turned around, he was gone, vanished. Not a single sound, not even footsteps on the gravel outside. The next morning, she asked Mrs. Lohman about it. The woman didn't seem surprised. "He's one of the regulars," she said quietly. "He doesn't go away easy once he knows you saw him." From that night forward, things began to deteriorate. Lights flickered. Bottles fell from the shelves without reason. The radio in the back would switch to static at random, and through the white noise she started hearing something. Breathing. Sometimes words. Whispers. "Open the door. It's so cold. Please let me in." Then came the night Renee was closing alone. The store was empty. The door was locked, the lights were dimmed, and she was counting the register. That's when she heard a knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps. She looked up. The man in the suit was back. Only this time, he wasn't alone. There were 3 others behind him, a woman with no eyes, a child holding a broken doll, and another figure too blurry to see clearly, like a smudge on reality itself. They stood shoulder to shoulder, unmoving, staring in through the glass. Renee backed into the storage room and shut the door. She stayed there until dawn. When she opened the store the next morning, the glass was clean, no footprints, no sign of anyone. She tried to quit. She told Mrs. Lohman she couldn't take it anymore. But Mrs. Lohman didn't blink. She just said, "You saw them. That means you're part of it now. You leave, they'll follow." Renee stayed a few more weeks, too scared to leave, too scared to stay. The last night she worked, she sent a text to her sister that read, "I think I made a mistake. I let him in." No one's seen her since. The cops searched the store, no signs of struggle, nothing missing, not even her purse. Just one thing out of place. The front door was wide open, even though the deadbolt was still engaged. And on the dusty floor in the middle of the aisle, there was a single wet footprint. They say the store still operates under a new name now. Different owners, new paint. But the door, it's still the same one. And sometimes late at night, customers report seeing a tall man in a suit reflected in the freezer glass, even when there's no one else around.
Story number 4.
There was an old liquor store in a small, forgotten town called East Hollow. The town was the kind of place where nothing ever happened. No news, no excitement, just quiet. But there was one thing that always unsettled the few people who lived there. McAllister's Liquor. The store had been around for decades, though no one really remembered who ran it before the current owner, Harold McAllister, took over. Harold was a strange man, quiet, unassuming, always wearing the same dark jacket, even on the hottest days. His store was dusty, and the shelves were filled with half-empty bottles that didn't seem to move much. Despite the eerie vibe, people still went in for their liquor, though they never lingered. Some of the townsfolk whispered about the odd noises that could be heard from the store at night, especially after midnight. Others spoke about the strange smell, something sour and bitter, coming from the back room. But nobody ever questioned Harold. He was just a weird old man, and the store had always been there. One night, a young man named Jason moved into East Hollow, fresh from college and looking for a quiet place to live. He heard about McAllister's Liquor on his first day in town and figured it would be a good place to stop by, grab a drink, and get to know the area. It was already dark when he walked into the store, the bell chiming as he opened the door. Harold stood behind the counter, as usual, staring blankly at a faded newspaper. His pale face barely moved when Jason greeted him. After picking out a bottle of bourbon, Jason walked to the counter and placed it down. "Long night?" Harold asked in a voice that seemed distant, like he wasn't really paying attention. Jason shrugged. "I just moved here. Thought I'd stop by." Harold didn't say anything in response. Instead, he pointed toward the back room. "You shouldn't stay too late," he said. "Strange things happen after midnight. The walls start listening." Jason chuckled nervously, thinking it was just an odd comment. After all, it was a quiet little town. He paid for the bottle and left, shaking off the uneasy feeling. But as Jason was walking back to his car, something made him look back at the store. The lights flickered briefly before going completely out. It was strange, but Jason didn't think too much of it. He had a feeling that the store was just different. The next night, Jason came back. This time, he decided to hang around a little longer. He walked around the store, browsing the dusty shelves, while Harold stayed in the back, not saying much. But around midnight, the atmosphere changed. The air grew heavy, and Jason heard a soft, distant noise, like something scraping against the floor. It wasn't coming from the shelves, but from behind the door to the back room. His curiosity got the best of him, and he made his way toward the door, his hand hovering over the knob. He thought he saw a shadow move under the crack of the door. When he opened it, the temperature seemed to drop instantly. The back room was like a freezer, cold and oppressive. The room was full of old bottles of liquor, some broken, others sealed in dust. But it wasn't the room that made Jason's skin crawl. It was the sound. There, lying on the floor in the corner, was a man. His eyes were wide open, frozen in terror. His hands were pressed against his chest, nails digging into the flesh. Jason took a step forward, but before he could move closer, Harold appeared at the door. "Get out," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Jason backed away, heart pounding. What happened to him? Harold's expression never changed. He stepped toward Jason and said, "He stayed too long, just like you're about to." Jason ran out of the store, slamming the door behind him, but the eerie feeling never left. The following days were uneventful, but Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with McAllister's liquor. He tried to talk to the townspeople about the man he saw in the back room, but no one knew anything about it. No one even mentioned that anyone had died in the store. It wasn't until he was walking through town one evening, passing by McAllister's, that he saw a familiar face. It was the man he had seen in the back room, alive, walking down the street with a blank, unblinking stare. Jason stopped in his tracks. He knew for a fact that man had been dead. He had seen him, his body frozen in fear, his eyes wide open. The man walked right past him without saying a word, but as he passed, Jason heard him whisper, just loud enough to hear, "You stayed too long." From that moment on, Jason never returned to McAllister's liquor, but he couldn't leave East Hollow. It was like the town had a hold on him, an invisible chain that kept him there, kept him waiting for something. He could never leave. And as the days passed, he began to notice something more unsettling. Every time he passed McAllister's liquor, he could see Harold's eyes watching him from the window, his gaze never leaving. And sometimes, if the light was right, Jason would see the figure of that man, the one who had died, standing just behind the counter, staring at him, waiting for him to come inside. No one ever talks about it, but the people in East Hollow know. If you stay too long, the store will claim you, forever.